Hello students, welcome to today's general medicine class. I am Dr. Sylvester Justin and today we are going to learn about sepsis. Okay, so a very important topic. Let's get started with the topic right away. What is sepsis? Sepsis is the body's overwhelming and life-threatening response to infection that can lead to tissue damage, organ failure and death. Severe sepsis is common in ICUs. In India, 15 to 20% of ICU admissions have sepsis. Lung is the most common source of infection, and gram-negative bacteria is the most common isolate. Mortality is high. 60 to 65% of patients with sepsis die. The worldwide results are similar to India in that lung is the commonest source of infection and gram-negative bacteria is the most common culprit, except that the mortality is lower at 33%, which is still quite high. The reasons may be better ICU facilities there and better doctor-patient ratio, better staff-patient ratio, and more ventilator per bed. So let's look at some of the definitions. What is bacteremia? Bacteremia is presence of bacteria in blood. So bacteria in blood is not sepsis. Okay, bacteria in blood is just bacteria. It need not be an infection like sepsis. So this can occur even during routine activities like chewing, brushing the teeth, or straining at stools. So during these normal routine physiological activities, the bacteria pass through the mucosal barrier and enter the blood. What is systemic inflammatory response syndrome then? SIRS, as it's known as. So it is a condition where we look at 4 parameters. One is the temperature. If the patient has fever or hypothermia, temperature more than 38 degrees Celsius or less than 36 degrees Celsius respectively, or if the patient has tachycardia, heart rate of more than 90 per minute, or tachypnea, respiratory rate of more than 24 per minute, or change in WBC count or the forms of cells. So a leukocytosis with WBC more than 12,000 or leukopenia with a WBC count less than 4,000 or bands more than 10%. If any two of these 4 are there, then it's called as systemic inflammatory response syndrome. So is SIRS equal to sepsis? Okay. So sepsis is harmful systemic inflammatory response to infection. Thus, sepsis is equal to SIRS due to suspected or proven infection. So if infection is causing SIRS, then it is sepsis. What is severe sepsis then? Sepsis with some degree of organ dysfunction. So it includes cardiovascular system, systolic blood pressure less than 91 or mean arterial pressure less than 71. Renal system, urine output less than 0.5 ml per kg in an hour despite fluids. Or a respiratory problem, PaO2 by FiO2 less than 251. So the partial pressure of oxygen divided by the fraction of oxygen in the inspired air. If it's less than 251, respiratory system, the lungs are affected. Hematological system, so platelet count less than 80,000, and acid-base system, unexplained metabolic acidosis is also severe sepsis. So what is the relation between all of these? Sepsis, SIRS, and all. We'll come to it. Septic shock. What is septic shock? Sepsis with hypotension, that is SBP less than 90 millimeters of mercury for 1 hour, despite adequate fluids, or sepsis which requires vasopressors to maintain SBP more than 90 or MAP more than 70. So septic shock is shock in sepsis, which is not treated just by IV fluids within 1 hour. It takes longer than that, or it takes vasopressors to treat it. That will be septic shock. What is refractory septic shock? That is, after you start the vasopressor and 1 hour after that, the shock is still continuing, then it's refractory septic shock. So this Venn diagram gives us the relation between different things which we just learned about. So infection and SIRS, when they combine, what you get in the middle is sepsis. So SIRS due to infection is sepsis. There can be infection without SIRS also. That is not part of sepsis. That's just plain infection. And there can be SIRS without infection. For example, the causes are given there: trauma, burns, pancreatitis. All of these will lead to systemic inflammatory response syndrome, but these are not caused by infection. So they will just be labeled as SIRS. Among sepsis, the most important infection is bacteremia, but other things like fungi and parasites, viruses can also lead to sepsis. So let's have a look at pathophysiology. Why does sepsis occur? I mean, if we get infection, the body's immune system should be able to handle it, and we should not be having sepsis. So why does this occur? So the same immune defense mechanism which protect the host causes sepsis. So there is some dysregulation taking place. So why does this happen? Okay. The reason is this may be due to some acquired deficiencies in the host immune response, or some virulence factors or toxins in the organism which is causing this immune dysregulation. Or there is presence of indwelling catheter or foreign matter in the host, which has formed a nidus for the infection to persist. So why does the host immune dysregulation occurs? One, it can be some genetically determined thing in the person's immune system. Acquired deficiencies might be there. And there can be virulence factors or toxins in the organism, or there can be presence of indwelling catheters or foreign matter in the host. So what are examples of virulence factors starting sepsis? One is LPS, lipopolysaccharide in gram-negative organisms, and lipoteichoic acid in gram-positive organisms. So the virulence factors are recognized by the host. So for example, LPS, binds to the binding protein, and it activates the MD2 and toll-like receptors, and it leads to release of human necrosis factors and other mediators. Now, depending on pathophysiological conditions, this can lead to sepsis, as you can see in the diagram. So once the mediators are released and still the organisms cannot be cleared, sepsis results. Effects of the mediators include the tumor necrosis factor alpha and interleukin 1. They go and activate the platelet activating factor, leukotrienes, arachidonic acid. All of these can lead to direct tissue injury. You can also activate the plasminogen activator inhibitor 1. This can lead to microvascular coagulopathy. So direct tissue injury as well as thrombosis of organs can take place. The system's attempt to control this spiraling inflammation leads to further immune deficiency and organ damage. Let's see how. So infection leads to systematic inflammatory response syndrome, and it leads to release of chemical mediators from endothelium. Now these mediators are histamines, prostaglandins, cytokines like interleukin 1, interleukin 6, and tumor necrosis factor alpha, also tissue factors, and chemokines like interleukin 8. Now these mediators cause vasodilation, capillary leakage, initiation of the clotting cascade. So this leads to uncontrolled systemic clotting and intravascular dehydration, both of which lead to decrease in perfusion and leads to multiple organ dysfunction. Also, all this can lead to depletion of clotting factors and can cause the reverse, that is uncontrolled bleeding, and this can lead to disseminated intravascular coagulation. Also, there can be prolonged corticosteroids release because of this, and as you know, that will lead to further immune system suppression. So immune system will fail and that will ultimately lead to mortality in the case of sepsis. So the immune system is not able to handle the microorganism, starts secreting more and more of these mediators, which instead of acting upon the microorganism, starts acting upon the tissues. That leads to hastening of all the bad processes in the body, leading to death. So at a biochemical level, the pathophysiology includes increase in bloodstream of more than 60 molecules, both pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory, like the complement system, coagulation system, and kallikrein kinin system. So this causes the immunodysregulation. Then these are released by endothelium in response to stimuli like tumor necrosis factor alpha. So this is endothelial injury. An increased lactate in blood leads to lowered pH and slowed metabolism. So acidosis takes place. And finally, vasodilatory molecules are released by endothelium like nitric oxide, bradykinin, prostacyclin, beta endorphin, and platelet activating factor. So all this lead to septic shock. So this can be the four, most important things at the biochemical level which cause the sepsis. One is immunodysregulation, another is endothelial injury, another is acidosis, the fourth is release of vasodilatory molecules causing septic shock. Okay, so what are the clinical manifestations of sepsis? So, as you know, sepsis is due to infection. So, the clinical manifestation includes fever or hypothermia too, tachycardia, tachypnea. So, these three things we have already seen under SIRs. Also, disorientation and confusion, because brain is also an organ system which starts getting affected. Nausea, vomiting, diarrhea can be other manifestations, and that can be sometimes skin manifestations, and this might even be specific for certain organisms. Let's see some of these skin manifestations. First, let's look at this. This is the mottled skin seen in sepsis. And this is not particular for any organism, but this is just because of all the septic shock leading to decreased perfusion pressure and stagnation of blood. And that leads to mottled skin sepsis. It's a very poor sign. So patient is probably in septic shock and circulatory failure. Okay, now comes something more specific, like the meningococcemia rash. Now here what you see is non-blanching petechiae and purpura. Basically, blood has extravasated in skin, leads to this sharply demarcated petechiae and purpura. Very specific for meningococcemia. Another thing is ecthyma gangrenosa. So what you see here is central hemorrhage and necrosis. Now this is not very common. It is seen mainly in immunocompromised patients, neutropenic patients, and it's caused by Pseudomonas aeruginosa. Okay, now this is another thing. Vibrio vulnificus causing sepsis. Now this is not much seen in India because the mode of acquiring Vibrio vulnificus. People who eat raw oysters get the Vibrio vulnificus sepsis. So there can be hemorrhagic or bullous lesions in these people. What we see here are blebs on the anterior aspect of both legs. So eating raw oysters contains Vibrio vulnificus and can cause sepsis with appearance of such blebs. What are the complications in sepsis? So we can go system by system. Let's start with the cardiovascular system. So we can have septic shock. So there can be decreased myocardial function also because of all the acidosis and everything. So heart's contractility itself decreases. Then respiratory system, there can be ARDS. We already saw the partial pressure of oxygen divided by the fraction of oxygen in inhaled air. That ratio should be more than 251. If it is less than 251, means there is very significant damage to the lungs. That's a complication of sepsis known as ARDS. What does ARDS stand for? So it stands for acute respiratory distress syndrome. Adrenal insufficiency. So it's also called as CILC, critical illness related corticosteroid insufficiency. Now this could be due to direct structural damage to adrenals or dysfunction of hypothalamus pituitary axis, or it could be due to corticosteroid resistance. So structural damage to adrenals, can it occur in sepsis? Is a very famous condition cause where there is damage to adrenals in a case of sepsis? Yes. So meningococcemia, you already saw the petechiae and purpura where there is bleeding in the skin. The same bleeding can occur in the adrenal glands and cause damage. In case of meningococcemia especially, it's called as Waterhouse-Friderichsen syndrome. Okay, coming to the next system, renal system. So because of decreased perfusion and acidosis, the renal system gets affected. There is oliguria, isotemia, and proteinuria. Then coming to hematological system, coagulopathy. This is due to thrombocytopenia. We have already seen this before. Platelet less than 80,000. Neurologic. So patient can go into delirium or something more peripheral, that is critical illness polyneuropathy. The patients may start having weakness of the limbs. This is called critical illness myopathy, critical illness polyneuropathy. And also immunosuppression occurs in sepsis. And liver dysfunction can also occur. So when two or more of these above systems are affected, it is called as multi-organ dysfunction syndrome. Okay, single organ system affected. Okay, it's just a complication in sepsis. If two affected, then it is multi-organ dysfunction syndrome. It's known by other names also, like multi-organ system failure, multi-system organ dysfunction. So there is not a consensus to call whatever it is, but it means that the patient is critical and multiple systems have started getting affected. What are the laboratory findings? Okay, so leukocytosis with a left shift, we already saw the bands more than 10%. So leukocytosis with a left shift can occur, or leukopenia can occur. Then thrombocytopenia or fallen platelet count from earlier value. Then hyperbilirubinemia, so when the liver starts getting affected. We also get raised AST and ALT, which are markers of liver injury. Proteinuria, that can signify your renal system dysfunction. Neutrophils with toxic granules or dull bodies, and increased serum lactate and metabolic acidosis. This is seen RT blood gas analysis. And hypoalbuminemia can also occur. And X-ray can give an ARDS kind of picture. So how do you diagnose? So there is no specific test for diagnosis. The clinical features plus the laboratory features is how you make the diagnosis. If you want a definitive diagnosis, you have to isolate the microorganism. So you have to do blood culture, or you should be able to demonstrate the microbial DNA in blood by doing a polymerase chain reaction test. So blood culture basically is the most important thing as far as diagnosis is concerned, because it does not just help with the diagnosis, it also helps with the treatment. Once we isolate the particular microorganism, we also can find what antibiotics the microorganism is sensitive to, so that we can use those to get rid of the infection. Treatment. So obviously we have to treat the infection which is triggering the sepsis. And sometimes in severe sepsis, because of organ dysfunction, we will have to support that particular organ. So we may have to give respiratory and hemodynamic support. And we also have to remove the source of infection, or if there's an infected fluid somewhere in the body, we have to drain it. So these are the most important parts. You have to treat the infection, you have to provide support to the organ systems which are failing, and you have to remove the source of infection, or whatever infected fluid pus is there in the body, or some catheter is there in the body, which is the source of infection, we have to remove. Let's look at some final aspects of this treatment. The first is treating infection. So how do we treat infection? So just now we saw that we have to send the blood culture to get the organism so that we can isolate them and can know what antibiotics the organism is sensitive to. But that takes some time. Blood culture can take 3 days or more. PCR test is faster, but not widely available. So what happens most often is that we take the blood for doing culture sensitivity and we start empirical antibiotics. So depending on all the past studies, the empirical antibiotic to be started in an immunocompetent person is this: piperacillin plus tazobactam, or imipenem plus cilastatin, or we can give ertapenem or meropenem, or cefepime, or ciprofloxacin and clindamycin. So these are all powerful antibiotics by themselves or by the combination unit which they are given. And apart from this, we have to add vancomycin. So that's because of MRSA, methicillin resistant Staphylococcus aureus, MRSA. It has become more and more common. It started, we can start seeing that in the community itself nowadays. It used to be a hospital acquired infection. Now it can be seen in community also. So to cover that, we have to give vancomycin, and of course the higher antibiotics. In a neutropenic patient, we also have fear of fungal infection. Apart from piperacillin, tazobactam, tobramycin, imipenem and cilastatin, or meropenem or cefepime, you will have to add vancomycin, and you may have to add antifungals also. So voriconazole or caspofunkin, or if there is, you have a culture sensitivity report saying only amphotericin B is useful in treating this infection, then amphotericin B. We should try to avoid amphotericin B because it's a very dangerous in a way because of all the organ system it affects. But In some cases, it is the only way. We have to be given with strict monitoring of the patient's parameters. In splenectomized patient, we have a fear that it is probably gram-negative bacteria. So we go for cefotaxime or ceftriaxone plus or minus vancomycin. So that high an antibiotic like piperacillin, tazobactam, or ertapenem, imipenem, meropenem may not be required. Cefotaxime or ceftriaxone might be enough. The patient is going to sepsis because he is or she is splenectomized. And in AIDS, you'll have to give cefepime or piperacillin plus tazobactam plus tobramazine. Again, immunocompromised state. Okay. So, do we have any specific molecule for treating sepsis? So, activated protein C was marketed a couple of decades ago now, saying that it has a specific role in sepsis and it helps in bringing patients of severe sepsis back to normal condition. But subsequent studies showed that there is no clear efficacy. Just the cost is high, but there is no clear efficacy. So it has been withdrawn from market and activated protein C. I think it's called drotrecogin alpha. So it's no longer required. We have to just treat with the antibiotics, and that alone will treat the infection. Next step is hemodynamic and respiratory support. The three things we see: infection to be treated, hemodynamic and respiratory support to be given, and removing the source of infection. So, hemodynamic support, first you start with IV fluids. So, first 1 hour, you try to replace the IV fluids that which the patient has lost. And if there's still the systolic blood pressure is less than 90, or the mean artery pressure is less than 70, or some say 65, then you'll have to start IV vasopressors. So IV noradrenaline is probably the best one to start. Earlier we used to even start dopamine, but the latest studies say that probably noradrenaline is better, and dopamine probably does not have much role in a case of sepsis. And steroids. Now this is a controversial topic. Now steroids, for example, hydrocortisone is what is given. Whether it should be given or it should not be given. So there are arguments both in favor for and against this. So in favor, so we just saw that hypothalamic pituitary axis is suppressed and there can be some deficiency of steroid in the body. So for that we can give hydrocortisone. But then there's already sepsis. The infection is running wild in the body. We want to give some more steroid and decrease the immune system further. So will it be beneficial or will it not be beneficial? So when a patient has severe sepsis and he's going out of our hands, and we are already giving him or her the best antibiotics, we are giving good hemodynamic and respiratory support, and still the patient is sinking, then we may have to give hydrocortisone, maybe even before all this state happens. But yeah, surely at that point when we don't have anything else much left, then maybe hydrocortisone can help us tide over it, and we hope that the antibiotics will control the infection, because the immune system might get depressed because of hydrocortisone. But maybe the antibiotics, good antibiotics which we are giving, can get rid of the infection, and the patient's steroid deficiency in the body will be overcome by the hydrocortisone. So, judicious use of hydrocortisone is allowed. Ventilator therapy. So, yes, the patient may go into ARDS and oxygen might be less in the body, in which case we will have to put the patient on ventilator. It's an artificial breathing mechanism. And blood transfusions if needed. So other supportive things. patient has anemia, we can treat that. And if the patient has hyperglycemia, diabetes, we can treat that. And then there was an early goal-directed therapy, adjusting the cardiac preload, afterload, and contractility. So basically, a central line had to be placed, and the patient's central venous pressure was monitored, and according to it, the preload, afterload, everything was managed. The intensive, and the studies are now saying that it's probably not recommended. So early goal-directed therapy is not being followed nowadays. We just go for the supportive management, which we saw just now. And then other supportive management, nutrition. So enteral is recommended. The parenteral is when you give by IV fluids, right? So enteral is recommended. So patient should be fed. If not by mouth, then we have to put a nasogastric tube and give feeds liquid diet. Bed care. Patient can start having bed sores because of lying down for a long time. So we have to prevent that by frequent positioning of the patient and changing to earlier it used to be a water bed. Now we have air beds, air mattresses called as alpha bed. And then we have to give DVT prophylaxis so that the patient does not have deep vein thrombosis, which can later become more problematic by embolizing to the pulmonary artery. And then stress ulcer prevention. So because of all the stress, that can be hypersecretion of the gastric acid juice and can lead to peptic ulcers. To prevent that, we have to give proton pump inhibitor therapy like pantoprazole, esomeprazole, so on. Blood glucose control, as I already said, and physiotherapy. Patient might require physiotherapy to keep his limbs in motion and to prevent a development of a critical illness, myopathy, and neuropathy. Also, lung physiotherapy might be required for the patient to regain his breathing reserve. Now, coming to latest recommendations. So, sepsis is not yet finished topic. Still, researches are going on because we saw mortality rate is very high. So, new and new research keeps coming. So, some things which we were doing earlier are now they say we should not do. So, for example, fluids. We have always been giving colloids and crystalloids, and then now they say we should not give starches for volume resuscitation. Regarding antibiotics, there's no point in waiting for patient to worsen and then start the best antibiotics. They say early administration is good. Vasopressors, yes, within 1 to 6 hours of after onset of sepsis, we may have to give, and norepinephrine, epinephrine, and vasopressin are preferred. Dopamine and phenylephrine are not preferred. Then enteral feeding should be done, and insulin therapy should be given. Deep sedation should be avoided. The patient should not be sedated to a deep level. That is not recommended nowadays. Molecular targeted therapies. Their role is yet to be ascertained. Lung protective ventilation. So while the patient is on ventilator, we have to make sure that there is no barotrauma. So we use smaller tidal volumes. We also use higher positive end expiratory pressure, PEEP, and of course, urine catheter and its care should be there. And the goal-oriented therapy and early goal-directed therapy, which were recommended some time ago, is now no longer recommended. Finally, prognosis. The 20 to 35% of severe sepsis patients die, and 40 to 60% of septic shock patients die. And if patient has a pre-existing illness, it leads to worse outcomes. for uncontrolled diabetes, or a patient having cerebrovascular accident from before, or a patient having history of myocardial infarction. In them, prognosis is poorer. And there are some scoring systems to assess whether the patient is improving or not. So these are prognostic scoring systems are useful. So one is the SOFA score, which is sepsis related organ failure assessment. There are 6 variables in it. And another is Apache score. Apache, acute physiology and chronic health evaluation. So like the Apache tribes of America, the system is also mostly in vogue in United States. It has more than 30 variables, I think. So it's difficult. More simpler would be SAPS, Simplified Acute Physiology Score, and it is more in vogue in Europe. I think in India, SOFA's system, SOFA score is best. It has just 6 variables you have to see, and it's easy and now quite validated. It's the latest one which has come up. So that is what we should take home about sepsis. What is sepsis? How it's related to SIRS, and what is pathophysiology at a biochemical level, at an tissue level, and what are the clinical features, and what are the specific manifestations in some of the organisms, especially skin manifestations, and how do you treat broadly? You treat the infection, and you give support to the organ systems, and then you remove the source of infection after finding wherever it is. The specific drugs, the antibiotics, has the main role. Vasopressors also have a main role, and ventilator has a main role. Then other supporting things has to be instituted, and in spite of all this, mortality is very high. So, best treatment possible we have to give, and we should keep updating ourselves about the latest treatment. It's an unsettled topic. We have to keep learning to bring the mortality rate, which is so high in India, 60 to 65%, break it down. We have to keep learning about it. Thank you for your patient listening.